The stage was a film set on the Warner Bros. Lot in Burbank, California, Stage 12. The year was 1993, and the production was moving into its third week of principal photography. There were 41 crew members on the floor that morning, a number recorded in the call sheet that still exists in the production archive. Grip stands and monitor carts lined the east wall. The lighting rig overhead threw a flat, even white across the polished concrete. It was 9:14 in the morning, and the coffee on the craft services table had already gone cold. Jean-Claude Van Damme was 32 years old. He stood 6 feet tall and weighed 185 pounds of competition muscle, the kind of muscle that had been earned not in a gym but on the mats of the Centre National de Karate in Brussels. Beginning at the age of 10, by 1993 he had held a European professional karate title. He had completed training in Shotokan under Claude Goetz. He had studied under the Belgian Kickboxing Federation and held competitive results that were documented, verifiable, and respected by serious practitioners across 2 continents. His films had grossed over $200 million in combined theatrical revenue. He was not a man performing athleticism for cameras. He was a man who had earned his credentials in rooms with no cameras at all. His flaw, in the winter of 1993, was a certainty so complete it had become invisible to him. The way a man stops smelling the air in a room he has lived in too long. In 11 seconds with 4 movements, everything he believed about that morning would be wrong. Nobody on that set understood what they were about to see. Not the grip who had worked 22 years in the industry. Not the first assistant director who had overseen productions on 3 continents. Not the boom operator who had his arm raised and his eyes on the talent. Every one of them would spend the following decade telling that story, and every version would be slightly different, because that is what happens when human beings witness something they cannot fully hold in their minds. They reach for the parts of it they can carry. Chuck Norris was 53 years old. He was sitting in a canvas back chair beside the 4th monitor cart from the left wall, wearing a gray t-shirt that had been washed so many times it had lost its shape entirely. He had on dark trousers and a pair of brown shoes that belonged to a man who had stopped thinking about his shoes a long time ago. He was holding a paper cup. He was not stretching. He was not warming up. He was not rolling his neck or rotating his wrists or bouncing on the balls of his feet. He was drinking something from a paper cup and watching the light change on the east wall. He did not look like what he was. That was, and had always been, the point. What he was this. He had begun his training in Tong-Soo-do in 1958, in Osan, South Korea, while serving as a United States Air Force policeman. He had earned his black belt in 1961. He had then trained under every serious system he could reach. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under the Machado brothers, boxing under Bob Barber, Taekwondo under Ji Han-jae, Judo under Jean LaBelle, who was by any neutral accounting one of the most dangerous men in the history of American combat sport. He had founded his own system, Chun-Kuk-do, in 1990. And he held black belts in 6 documented disciplines. He had competed seriously and won. He had trained men for whom violence was not a career choice but a professional requirement. He had spent 35 years inside martial arts culture and emerged with a silence about it that the uninitiated sometimes mistook for humility, and the initiated understood to be something else entirely. He sat in the chair, and he watched the light, and he drank from the paper cup. Van Damme had been working his way through a morning warm-up near the East Corridor, about 30 feet from where Norris sat. He had been moving through combination drills, roundhouse, sidekick, spinning back fist, the kind of fluid practiced motion that is beautiful to watch and lethal to receive. 3 of the production assistants had stopped what they were doing to look. That is what genuine skill does in a room. It pulls the eye. Van Damme understood this. He had built an entire career on the knowledge that when a body moves at a certain level of refinement, it communicates something to every other body in the room. He finished the combination. He rolled his right shoulder once. He turned. He looked at Chuck Norris sitting in the chair. What happened next has been reconstructed from 4 separate witness accounts, 2 of which were given on record in published interviews, and 2 of which remain in private correspondence that was made available for this account. The accounts differ in minor particulars. They agree in every essential. Van Damme walked across the floor. He stopped approximately 8 feet from the chair. The first assistant director, a man named Gerald Fowler, who had worked with Norris on 2 previous productions, was standing 11 feet to the left with a clipboard in both hands. He did not move. He did not speak. He would later say that he understood immediately that something was happening that did not require his participation. Van Damme said, "I want to see what you actually know." He said it without aggression in the conventional sense. There was no raised voice. There was no posturing of the kind that precedes street violence. He said it the way a man says something he has been considering for a while, and has finally decided to say out loud. He said it with the confidence of a man who had been the best person in every room he had walked into for the past 4 years, and who had perhaps begun to mistake a very long string of rooms for all rooms. He had a technique for every distance. Everyone on that set knew it. Everyone who had ever watched one of his films knew it. His kicking range, his punching range, his clinch work. He had demonstrated it 20 minutes earlier against a heavy bag in the equipment corner, and 3 grip technicians had exchanged a particular kind of look. The look of men who are watching something real, and know they are watching something real. That was not theater. What Van Damme could do with his body was not theater. His flaw was that he knew it. Chuck Norris set the paper cup down on the floor beside the chair. He set it down carefully, as a man sets something down when he intends to come back for it. He stood. He removed the gray sweatshirt that had been folded across the arm of the chair and placed it on the seat, pressing it flat once with the back of his hand. He walked forward. He stopped 6 feet from Van Damme. He looked at him for a moment. He said, "All right." That was the entirety of his contribution to the verbal portion of the exchange. Before you find out what those next 11 seconds looked like, understand what was actually about to happen. Because this is the part that separates what was on that floor from what most people imagine when they imagine a confrontation between 2 men who can fight. A confrontation between men at this level is not 2 people striking each other. It is a conversation about geometry. It is a negotiation about distance, conducted at a speed that removes the possibility of deliberate thought. The man who controls the geometry controls the outcome. Everything else, the power, the technique, the conditioning, is secondary to the question of who understands the space between 2 bodies better, and who can move through that space before the other man has finished deciding what to do about it. Chuck Norris had been having that conversation for 35 years. He had been having it against men who were in some cases objectively superior to him in raw physical attributes. He had won those conversations not by being stronger or faster, but by being more precise about where he was and where the other man thought he was, and by ensuring those 2 locations were never the same place. If you want to understand what you are about to hear, make sure you stay until the end of this account, because what Chuck Norris said from a distance of 4 inches, after it was already over, is the part of this story that none of the published accounts have gotten right. If you find this kind of account worth your time, subscribe now, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. There are people watching this from places the production team did not expect, and it matters to know where the story is reaching. Second 1. Van Damme moved first. He closed distance with a lead leg oblique kick directed at Norris's left knee, which is the correct opening move against an opponent of Norris's size and experience, because it disrupts the base before the opponent can establish it. It was technically sound. It was quick. It was the movement of a man who had thrown that kick 10,000 times. Gerald Fowler, the first assistant director, had his clipboard flat against his chest without being aware of having raised it. He would describe this later as involuntary. His hands understood something before his mind did. Norris was not where the kick arrived. He had moved laterally off the line of attack, not backward, which is the instinct of a less experienced man, but sideways, at an angle that removed him from the geometry of the kick without surrendering distance. He moved 14 inches to the right. The kick passed through air that had until a fraction of a second earlier contained him. Second 2. Van Damme's kick landed and he recovered. because he was too experienced to be off balance for more than a fraction. He turned, recalibrated and threw a right cross, compact and fast. The kind of punch that is not designed to telegraph itself. A punch thrown for effect rather than announcement. It was the right response to the first exchange. He had assessed in real time that Norris was faster than he had expected, and he had adjusted. Norris slipped it. He did not block it. He did not parry it. He slipped it, rotated his head 4 inches off the center line, so the punch passed the left side of his face close enough that Van Damme would feel the air resistance of missing. Then Norris's right hand found Van Damme's right wrist in the follow-through of the cross, not gripping it, cradling it, guiding it, redirecting its momentum forward and down. Marcy Ellison, a wardrobe assistant who had been standing near the costume rack on the north wall, 22 feet from the exchange, later said that at this moment she believed it was choreography. She believed 2 professionals were running a rehearsed sequence. It took her until the 3rd second to understand that it was not. Second 3. Norris used the redirected momentum of the cross to close the remaining distance between them. He moved inside Van Damme's punching range, inside his kicking range, inside every range that Van Damme had spent 20 years optimizing. At this distance, everything Van Damme had developed became temporarily unavailable. His legs needed room, his punches needed extension. He had weapons for every distance except the one he was now occupying. Norris had planned to be at that distance before the exchange began. His left arm came across Van Damme's chest in a position that combined elements of the Judo Kazushi and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu control position that Jean Labelle had spent years drilling into him on the mats of gyms in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. It was not one system. It was the distillation of 35 years of learning how bodies move against each other when neither body is cooperative. Van Damme felt the shift in his base and did what any experienced martial artist does. He moved to recover. He attempted to widen his stance and lower his center of gravity, which is the correct response. It was the last decision of the exchange that Van Damme would make. Second 4. Norris completed the takedown. It was not a throw in the dramatic, cinematic sense. It was a removal. Van Damme's back met the polished concrete of stage 12 at 9:17 in the morning, and the sound it made was not a crash but a flat, conclusive report, the kind of sound a decision makes when it lands. Norris was beside him. His right forearm was across Van Damme's chest. His left hand had Van Damme's right wrist in a position that made extension impossible. The pin was not painful. It was geometric. Van Damme could not rise, not because of force applied, but because of position arranged. There was no path out of it that did not require Norris to permit the exit. Gerald Fowler had stopped breathing. He became aware of this only after it was over. The boom operator, a man named Dennis Hale who had 24 years of experience on studio floors, and who had in that time witnessed 2 on-set altercations and 1 incident that had required police presence, later said that the 4 seconds felt like something that happened inside a different unit of time than the seconds on either side of it. He said, "I've been in rooms where something goes wrong and time stretches. This was the opposite. It compressed. All of it happened, and then, it had already happened." Norris held the position. He was not breathing hard. He was not flushed. The gray t-shirt had not changed its relationship to his body. He looked, to the witnesses on that floor, like a man who had walked across a room and sat back down, except that he was on the ground, and there was another man beneath him. Van Damme looked at the ceiling of stage 12. The ceiling of stage 12 was a standard studio grid, black pipes, lighting instruments, catwalk access on the north and south sides, cables taped in parallel bundles running east to west. It was not a notable ceiling. It was the kind of ceiling a man might look at when he is arriving, very quickly and without preparation, at an understanding he had not expected to have that morning. Norris released the pin. He rose. He did not do it with effort. He extended his right hand downward. Van Damme looked at the hand for 2 seconds. This is the moment that witnesses describe most consistently when they tell the story. Because 2 seconds, in that context, with that hand extended in that direction, is a long time. long enough for a choice to be visible on a man's face, long enough for the room to understand what was being offered, and what it would cost to take it. Van Damme took the hand. As Norris pulled him upright, he brought his mouth close to Van Damme's ear. He said something. He said it quietly, in a tone that did not carry to the witnesses. Marcy Ellison was 8 feet away and heard no words, only the register of a voice. Gerald Fowler was 11 feet away and said later that he heard 2 or 3 syllables and then nothing more. Dennis Hale, who was farthest from the exchange, heard nothing. What Norris said in that moment was not written down until 11 years later, when Van Damme mentioned it in a recorded interview that was subsequently published in a Belgian martial arts journal. He said it in French first and then in English for the interviewer. He said Norris had told him, "You already know, you just forgot for a minute. That was everything." 5 words in English. The private sentence, delivered at a distance of 2 inches, on a studio floor in Burbank, California at 9:17 in the morning, while 39 of the 41 crew members on set had stopped doing whatever they had been doing, and while the coffee on the craft services table was still cold, and while the light through the overhead grid fell flat and even across the concrete, and was indifferent to all of it. Van Damme stood. He was still. His breathing had returned to normal, or nearly to it. His hands were at his sides. There is a particular quality to a man's stillness when he has just been educated by something that was not in his lesson plan. It is different from ordinary stillness. Ordinary stillness is the absence of movement. This kind of stillness is the presence of something being processed. Van Damme stood in it. Then he nodded once. He did not offer an explanation. He did not suggest that he had not been trying, or that he had been off balance, or that the morning's conditions had been unsuitable. He did not reach for an exit that the situation provided, because the situation did provide one. If he had wanted it, he could have said any of several things, and some of them would have been accepted by the room and by the man in front of him. He said nothing. He nodded once. This is the version of that moment that has been confirmed by every witness account that exists. And it is the version that matters, because a man reveals himself most completely not in the moment of defeat, which is involuntary, but in the moment after it, which is not. Norris picked up the gray sweatshirt from the canvas chair. He placed it over his arm. He walked back to where the paper cup was on the floor and picked it up. Gerald Fowler uncrossed his arms. He looked at his clipboard. He did not recall looking at it, but a subsequent glance at the production notes confirmed that he had written nothing on it during the exchange. He had apparently simply held it. Dennis Hale, the boom operator, lowered his arm. He had been holding the boom in position since before the exchange began, and he had not moved it during the 11 seconds. And he had not been aware of this until he became aware of the weight of holding it. By the afternoon of that day, the account had moved through 3 departments. By the following morning, it had reached the stunt department on an adjacent stage. Within a week, it had moved into the broader Los Angeles production community, which is a community that operates on narrative the way other economies operate on currency. Stories of this kind carry their own momentum. They travel, they gain details in some tellings and lose them in others. In one version that circulated for several years, the exchange lasted 30 seconds and involved a second takedown. In another version, Norris had been provoked verbally before Van Damme moved. Neither of these details was present in the original accounts of any witness on that floor, and both were grafted onto the story in the retelling, because stories that travel far enough eventually begin to accumulate the features of the genre they are traveling through, which is the genre of the reckoning story. And in reckoning stories there must be escalation, and there must be culmination, and so the story adds them when the actual record does not provide them in sufficient quantity. What the record provides is simpler and in its simplicity, more durable. A man who had spent a great deal of time being the best person in the room walked across a room and met a man who had spent a great deal more time understanding what rooms are for. The exchange lasted 11 seconds. Both men returned to work. The production continued. The crew held their positions and completed the shoot. Van Damme's career following that period demonstrated, in the view of those who understood the exchange on stage 12, a quality of seriousness about the technical aspects of martial arts that his earlier work had sometimes subordinated to the requirements of entertainment. He pursued additional training. He spoke in interviews about the limits of what cinema required of a body versus what actual encounter required of one. Whether the 11 seconds on stage 12 were a factor in this shift is a question that cannot be answered with the precision this account has otherwise tried to maintain, but Van Damme himself, in the Belgian Journal interview of 2004, said, "There are things you know in your body that your mind forgets for a while. Sometimes something happens that reminds you." He said this without elaboration. The interviewer did not press him. Chuck Norris did not speak publicly about the exchange on stage 12. He has not spoken about it in any recorded interview, published memoir, or public appearance in the 3 decades since it occurred. There are men who tell a story by telling it, and there are men who tell a story by not telling it. Both methods, in the right hands, are exact. What the exchange on stage 12 demonstrated, in the judgment of the witnesses who were qualified to judge it, was not that Jean-Claude Van Damme was lesser than he had believed. He was exactly what he had believed himself to be: trained, committed, serious, and skilled at a level that placed him among a small number of men in the world. What the exchange demonstrated was that this level, impressive as it was not the last level, that there were men who had continued further, not because they were given more talent, but because they had refused the satisfaction of being finished. Competence, held long enough without renewal, begins to feel like mastery. This is not a failure of character, it is a feature of the mind that protects a man from the exhaustion of perpetual uncertainty. It is useful until it isn't. It stops being useful the moment a man encounters someone who chose the exhaustion on purpose, year after year for 35 years. At 5:45 in the morning, on mats in rooms with no cameras, the light kept moving across the floor of stage 12 for the rest of that day. The grip stands stayed where they were. The monitor carts did not move. The production notes from the afternoon session make no reference to the morning. There is no formal record of what happened on that floor except the accounts of the people who were there, and those accounts, taken together, agree on the essential. It lasted 11 seconds. It took 4 movements. When it was over, a man who had forgotten something remembered it. Next week, this account turns to the morning in a Tokyo gymnasium in 1971, when a 31-year-old Chuck Norris walked onto the floor of the All Japan Karate Championship as the only non-Japanese competitor in the building, and what the head judge said to him before the opening match, and what Norris answered, and what happened in the following 4 minutes that the head judge would recount to his own students for the next 40 years without changing a single word.